TV presenter Jeremy Clarkson has revealed that he's been diagnosed with aggressive prostate cancer in an emotional video.
To understand why any of this matters, you first need to understand the cage Jeremy Clarkson spent the better part of his life trapped inside. Most people know him as the loudest voice in motoring, but the volume came later. He worked his way up through small regional papers, writing car reviews and grinding out columns long before a single camera was ever pointed at him. He stepped onto Top Gear for the very first time on the 27th of October 1988, and the producer who brought him in, a man named John Bentley, picked him for one straightforward reason. Bentley needed an energetic motoring journalist who could make cars feel electric on screen, and Clarkson fitted that bill because he was genuinely funny. That was the whole weapon. He could take the most forgettable car in existence and make you feel like you absolutely had to see it move, and the channel constructed an empire on the strength of that single quality. But here is what the highlight packages always cut around. Every line of dialogue, every throwaway comment, every reference he landed was dissected by the people sitting above him. He has spoken about this in plain terms, and the bitterness sitting inside it is both real and pointed. After he finally left, he revealed that in all those years, not one person had ever once told him his work was good. His exact words were that they would review the footage, and you would never receive a wow, never hear a "that was brilliant," not across 27 years of turning up and doing the job. He put it bluntly, the place was full of talented, hardworking people who were genuinely terrible at managing the talent they had in front of them. Then, in 2015, everything broke apart. There was a confrontation in which he physically struck one of his own production team over something as trivial as a cold meal at the end of an exhausting shoot. The corporation suspended him, and within weeks, it was confirmed his contract would not be renewed. The man who had built their most valuable crown was walked out without a ceremony. What he did next is the entire reason any of this is worth examining. He did not try to win his way back in. He crossed straight over to Amazon and rebuilt the whole operation from the ground up, on his own conditions, with his closest collaborators beside him, in a deal the press put at somewhere around £160 million. For the first time in his professional life, no one was holding a blade above his head. He later recalled that the new team would watch his material and actually say the word "wow" out loud, the single thing he had never once been given across all those previous years. Freedom, as it turned out, sounded exactly like a word he had been waiting his entire working life to hear. So when a man carrying that exact weight looks over at someone like Matt Armstrong, he is not simply watching an inventive mechanic at work. He is looking directly at the freedom he had to bleed to earn. And that is precisely where this story goes, somewhere the BBC would strongly prefer you did not follow. Matt Armstrong did something Clarkson was never once permitted to do. He reached millions of people without asking a single person for approval. Most of you already have a rough picture of who he is, so I will keep the background brief. He came from no privileged background. He was a BMX rider until the sport took its toll on him, and then, almost without a plan, he started filming himself bringing a wrecked Audi back to life, a car his partner had crashed and he had bought back from the insurer for a few £100s. There was no network funding the project, no executive approving the concept, no studio releasing a budget. There was a workshop, a camera, and a complete refusal to accept that a broken car had to stay broken. People found it impossible to stop watching. Then the world locked itself down through the pandemic, and with all that static time on people's hands, he dragged a battered old Bentley back from complete ruin and posted every step of it online. That build was the one that pushed him past 100,000 subscribers, and the momentum from there simply never slowed. Today he sits at just under 7 million subscribers and close to 1 billion views, and he achieved every single bit of it without a television commissioner ever waving him through. The comment section became his editorial desk. The audience became his only employer. And that word, permission, is the quiet engine running through the whole of this story. Clarkson spent 27 years chasing it, and rarely receiving it. Matt never had to chase it once. Two men with nearly identical instincts, the same reckless nerve, the same drive to do the precise thing the comfortable establishment insists should not be attempted, separated by one generation and one enormous shift in who actually controls the reach. One of them had to wrestle the gatekeepers for his entire career. The other simply stepped around them as though they had never been standing there at all. But before we reach what Clarkson actually said, you need to understand the specific moment that first dragged his attention toward Matt. Because it involved a hypercar, a very wealthy young man in Miami, and a phone call that had absolutely no business taking place. Alex Gonzalez lived in Miami and had built most of his money through online currency trading. At 24 years old, he bought a Bugatti Chiron per Sport. This is not a standard Bugatti by any measure. Only 60 were ever produced. It carries an 8-liter 16-cylinder engine with 4 turbochargers, produces roughly 1,500 horsepower, and when it rolled off the production line, it was worth somewhere north of £3 million. Then Alex put it into the back of a lorry. The airbags fired, the entire front structure was demolished, and one of the rarest cars anywhere on the road was suddenly worth a fraction of what had been paid for it. Most people would call the insurer and be done with it. But this is Bugatti, so Alex rang the factory, and the number they came back with is what set everything in motion. The first quote to restore the car was around $1.7 million. They later reduced it to roughly $600,000, and he still said no, because he was already paying somewhere between $70,000 and $90,000 a month simply to finance the vehicle. The car was written off. A specialist was flown in from Paris to assess it, and it ended up listed on a salvage auction platform, sitting beside flooded pickup trucks and fire-damaged saloons. Alex repurchased his own car, flew a man over from England, and handed him the keys. That man was Matt Armstrong. Then Bugatti did something very revealing. They blacklisted the car's identification number, which meant no franchise dealer anywhere on Earth could sell a single official part for it. The message was transparent enough. This machine belongs to us rather than to you, and we will not permit you to touch it. So why would one of the most powerful manufacturers in the world feel the need to respond to a YouTuber at all? What did they see approaching that made them reach for the phone? The answer has almost nothing to do with carbon fiber and airbags, and nearly everything to do with a secret these companies have been protecting for a very long time. The lock they never wanted you to discover here is what the polished marketing will never acknowledge. When Matt went after his Ferrari, everyone assumed the hard part would be the metalwork, the buckled panels, the crushed nose, the components scattered across the workshop floor. And in fairness, the car was in a terrible condition. He had taken on a wrecked 296, Ferrari's compact hybrid that pairs a 6-cylinder engine with an electric motor to generate around 819 horsepower. The floor was punctured. The suspension had been ripped away entirely. The wiring had been torn clean out of it. Any reasonable person looking at that wreck would assume the bodywork was the real test. It was not the real test. The real obstacle was the electronics. When he finally had the car reassembled and turned the ignition, a message appeared reading "Hybrid system failure, go to dealer." 4 short words carrying an enormous amount of weight. The car was not broken in any conventional mechanical sense. It had decided at a software level that it did not recognize the situation around it, and it refused to operate until a Ferrari-approved technician signed off and confirmed that everything was in order. The genuine lock was never the body panels. The genuine lock was a line of code, and only the manufacturer holds the key to it. The entire game has been quietly rewritten beneath our feet. Repairing a car used to come down to whether you possess the skill. Now it comes down to whether you possess the permission. Ferrari told Matt directly that they would only engage with the car if it arrived complete and had been signed off by one of their own certified body shops. But he had already fitted it with a genuine track kit from the race-only variant, which is not road legal, which meant it could never clear that inspection in the first place. The door is always left just fractionally closed. He spent a significant sum trying to find a way through it. By some estimates, he brought approximately $11,000 worth of components to Ferrari, and the entire affair spiraled into what one motoring journalist described as a $131,000 ordeal. A single battery estimate came back at around 18,000 pounds on its own. This is not repairing a car anymore. This is paying a toll to be readmitted to a club you were never supposed to exit. These manufacturers are not guarding you from risk. They are guarding a commercial arrangement in which you remain dependent on them permanently. And Matt Armstrong, with a workshop and a camera and several million people watching, was methodically demonstrating that the lock could be picked. Now you understand why a billionaire reached for his phone. It was never genuinely about safety. It was about what becomes of that entire model the moment ordinary people stop accepting that the lock is real. And that precise fear, the fear of the gatekeeper losing his grip, is something Jeremy Clarkson understood more deeply than almost anyone alive, because those gatekeepers kept their hand pressed against his throat for 27 years. Which brings us, finally, to what he actually recognized. Now we arrive at the core of it, the thing that quietly unsettled the old guard. When Clarkson looks at someone like Matt, he is not looking at a competitor in any sense. He is looking at the exact path he himself was never once permitted to walk. Consider the parallel for a moment, because it becomes almost uncomfortable when you lay it out directly. Both men came from unremarkable backgrounds. Both refused absolutely to be told no. Both constructed their entire reputations on a kind of fearless audacity, on doing the precise thing the respectable establishment maintained should never be attempted. Clarkson took a television format that was fading and seized it by the neck. Matt took a car that was finished and dragged it back to life with his hands. The instinct powering both of them is completely identical. The distinction is everything. Clarkson had to earn his freedom one painful inch at a time, across decades, with executives pushing back the entire way, and even then, they retrieved it from him in the end. Matt was simply born into a world where that particular cage no longer existed for him. He never had to petition a single person for the right to reach millions. He never had to blunt a joke for an anxious manager sitting 2 floors above him. He never had to wait 27 years to hear that his output was valued, because the audience delivers that verdict in real time, continuously, every day of the week. Clarkson spoke about how Matt holds complete creative authority over his own ideas, the very thing he himself was never genuinely permitted on television. He grasped, perhaps more clearly than he would have liked, that a man working in a garage with no broadcaster behind him could build an audience that might eventually overtake anything the old machine ever produced at its peak. That is not a message the BBC would ever want amplified, because buried inside it is a confession. It concedes that the gate they patrolled so fiercely for so long has simply been bypassed, and that talent no longer needs them the way it once so urgently did. There is a single moment that connects these two worlds so neatly it almost feels constructed. Matt once rebuilt a crashed Lamborghini Aventador with the sole purpose of chasing down a lap record, and the time he was targeting was one that belonged to Jeremy Clarkson himself, a 1:59 that had remained untouched for years. His team got closer than all the others who had tried. They simply could not catch Clarkson. The old record still stood, perfectly intact, even as the entire new generation threw everything at it. And somehow, that is the perfect portrait of the relationship between these two men. The new world chasing at full stretch, the old world still just beyond reach. The two of them bound together forever by a single time stamped on a damp circuit. But the establishment was never going to stand quietly by while the power drained from its offices. And what the BBC has done about it is the detail almost nobody is discussing. For decades, the arrangement was clean and it was brutal. If you wanted to reach millions with a television program about cars, you went through the broadcasters, and the doors opened only to those willing to accept being managed. Clarkson lived inside that arrangement for almost his entire professional life. Matt Armstrong dismantled the whole thing without appearing to notice it had ever existed. Now watch carefully what the institution is doing in response. At the very opening of this year, the corporation announced a sweeping new arrangement with the very platform that produced creators like Matt. They are publishing their own content directly onto it, launching dedicated channels, and most pointedly of all, they have established a fully funded scheme with the National Film School to develop the next wave of digital creators. Their own Director General described it as a groundbreaking collaboration that would allow them to engage with audiences in entirely new ways, and called it an unprecedented program to prepare the next generation of creators right across the country. The institution that kept its hand pressed against Clarkson's collar for 27 years is now openly attempting to recruit and shape the very people who bypassed it completely. The workshop defeated the studio so thoroughly that the studio has come to knock on the workshop door with its hat in its hands. And that is the deeply uncomfortable truth sitting at the foundation of this entire story. The one the old machine would far prefer you moved on from without pausing to examine. The power shifted, it drained out of the corner offices and into the hands of people with a camera, a tool set, and an idea, and it is not moving back. Consider for a moment what that actually means for someone in Matt's position. Television would offer him a vastly larger audience. the kind of reach that extends well beyond car enthusiasts and into living rooms across the entire country. But it would arrive carrying the oldest price in the industry, the exact same price Clarkson spent 27 years paying. Someone else decides what you say, someone else holds the lead, and the great unspoken question hanging over all of it is whether a man who has only ever operated with complete freedom would ever willingly surrender a portion of it, even in exchange for all that reach. Clarkson, of all people, understands precisely what that transaction costs a man, which is perhaps why his quiet admiration carried a warning buried somewhere inside it. So here is what I keep returning to, again and again. The blacklisted Bugatti, the four-word message glowing on the Ferrari dashboard, the silence across those 27 years, the sudden warmth from the old guard. Every one of those things is the same story wearing a different set of clothes. It is the story of a handful of powerful gatekeepers slowly coming to terms with the fact that they no longer hold the only key, and a man in a workshop quietly proving it to millions of people, night after night, who never once needed anyone's approval to watch. So tell me honestly, what do you think Clarkson actually recognized when he looked across at Matt, a younger version of himself finally given room to breathe, or a quiet signal about exactly where all of this is heading next? Put your genuine thoughts in the comments below.